Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Multnomah County Board of Commissioners' second budget work session. Commissioner Moyer will be excused today at 11:30. Audience members, I want to start by asking you to please silence your electronic devices. And for all presenters, please state your name for the record before speaking or responding to questions. And our first item today is a briefing on Multnomah County's financial and budget policies and investment policy. And with that, I am really happy to turn things over to Eric Ariano, our Chief Financial Officer. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. For the record, Eric Ariano, Chief Financial Officer. And like you said, I am here to talk about the financial and budget policies and investment policy for fiscal year 2027. And to be very clear, they're two separate policy documents. And today, just for some clarity, today is just a briefing. I'm not asking you folks to approve these policies, but as Christian described yesterday, that I will come back on budget adoption date to request your approval on both policy documents. And I'm also going to, for this year's review of the policies, we are proposing a new policy statement around grant making. And I have some guests, Sherry Campbell and Brian Smith, that are going to come up with me during that time because they're very into the deep weeds around the proposed policy and the process. And I want to make sure that we're as thorough as possible in describing what we're proposing with the policy. So. But I will ask them at the time to come up. So next slide. And so very similar to what I've done in the past, I'm going to do, my apologies, I like to talk about policies, and a lot of it seems repetitive, but it's important that we do a refresh of these policies every year. And so what I'm going to go through is kind of, again, a refresher. What's in our policies, why we have them, and then some of the changes that we're proposing. Here's a quick agenda. Again, what are our policies? Why do we have them? And policies and our principles and rules and guidelines adopted by the board to reach long-term financial goals. Policies help preserve and enhance the financial health of the organization. They help us follow best practices in terms of, from a policy standpoint, but also from just an operational standpoint in terms of financial management. As I shared, we do an annual review, and the annual review is assessing each individual policy to see if we need changes, enhancements, things have changed, are they relevant, not relevant, and then we also, if there's anything that, a new policy that's necessary, we propose it. And so this cycle, we're proposing a new policy statement around grant making, and we'll obviously get into some details around that policy. Most of the other changes are pretty cosmetic, reference updates, fiscal year updates, minor changes, but not substantive. And I will note that the policies have gone through a lot of changes over the last couple of years in terms of what's in them. We've added a couple of policy statements. And then I will go through the investment policy. Again, that's a separate policy document required by Oregon by statute to have a separate investment policy. We do have a policy statement in our financial budget policies around cash management investments, but it points to our investment policy. We're not proposing any changes to the investment policy, but again, we have to do a review every year, and we have to have it approved every year by the governing body. And then I'll talk a little bit about other financial tools that we use, whether it's external audit, internal audit, accounting pronouncements that come forward, and we have obviously administrative procedures on the financial end that we use adjacent to the financial and budget policies. So next slide. So I always like to say this, that this policy document is a policy document from the board. Should reflect the board's priorities and goals. And so we kind of have 6 overarching policy goals in the framework of our policies. I'll read them out. First one is preserve capital through prudent budgeting and financial management. A most productive use of funds to meet goals established by the board. Achieve stable balance between ongoing commitments and revenues. Leveraging local funds with federal and state funds. Supporting government accountability. And obviously the board intends to comply with all federal, state, governmental accounting, GAAP and Governmental Accounting Standards Board pronouncements. And again, they're subject to annual review, and they're adopted or approved by the board annually. I will note this, I was not aware of this in prior years, but Althea from the Budget Office, which Althea is amazing, the Budget Office submits every year their budget document, GFOA, for the Excellence Award. And in their process, they actually go through and score certain sections of the policy, of the budget document, and the financial and budget policies sit in the budget document. And so the policies get a review and a scoring. And Althea reminded me that we had 3 scores for the policies, and 2 of the scores were the highest you can get, and one of them was slightly below the highest, but still good. So I just wanted to reference that. I was not aware of that, and she let me know that this year. So, we try to follow Government Financial Officers Association's best practices in terms of how we set up the policies. We feel like we do a good job with that, but it's always good to have an outside party that reviews it to kind of validate that. So. And then we have currently 19 policy statements, but with if you were to approve the grant-making policy, we would have a total of 20 policy statements. And again, they're subject to annual review. But one of the big pieces that we do with the annual review is making sure, are we complying with the policies? And that's really important. Not just the review, but are we actually doing what we're saying we're doing? And then obviously we recommend any enhancements that are necessary on an annual basis. And I just want to note too that just because it's an annual process doesn't mean there can't be changes throughout the year, but it's our cadence that at least once a year that we do this review. So next slide. So policies reflect best practices, like I mentioned. We follow GFOA best practices in terms of areas of where you should have policies. But they're really tailored to, our policies are tailored to Multnomah County. Obviously, you want to follow best practices, but at the same time, every government's slightly different, and you want to tailor it to the organization. Our policies promote stability and continuity. They provide strategic intent. They define limits, and they support a good bond rating. I'm going to pause really quick on this. The reflection of that we always want to have a good bond rating is that we have a AAA rating from Moody's and S&P, and you know that. But we haven't been rated since 2021 when we issued the library bonds, and then we had refunded the Selwood Bridge bonds, but we were AAA rated then. But every year, the rating agencies do look at our financial statements to say if significant things change, they might adjust their assessment, but it's a pretty informal process. But I will note that in May of 2025, we did have what they call a maintenance review. And a maintenance review is essentially a more formal, like I'm reassessing your bond rating. And so you go through a process. And I think what triggered it was the discussions around the deficit and HSD with supportive housing. Another thing, obviously, with Jeff talked about a lot, property values downtown. That was another trigger that had him look at it. The good news is that we still maintain our AAA rating. They noted that we had a still stable tax base. We had healthy liquidity, which means we have good cash flows to meet our obligations. We had good low debt levels. But one of the things they mentioned that really caught my attention was our reserve, not necessarily the level of the reserve, but how we manage the reserve. And so you want to reserve for certain conditions to be met, right? But using your reserve recurringly is not a good thing. That reflects that something's going on with your projecting, your forecasting, your financial planning. And we set a reserve, we maintain that reserve, we rarely use those reserves, and that reflects that we do a really good job with our process around forecasting and budgeting. And so big kudos to Christian and Jeff around the process, but also just the accuracy of the general fund forecast. The supports, it's again indirect, but it supports our ability around how we manage the reserves. So no pressure to Jeff and Christian to continue to get that right, but it does help. So it does help. Yeah. So our policy framework's kind of built around the budget process. We establish broad goals to guide decision-making. We develop an approach to achieve those goals, and then we develop a process with that approach. And then we evaluate performance, we evaluate if adjustments are needed. Features of effective policies, obviously they're written form, they're reviewed recurringly, and they have clear goals. And then we always want a balance of control and flexibility in our policies. They comply with the law, and again, they have flexibility for us to adjust as needed when necessary, because things do change, and we're a big organization, and we need flexibility in some of our policies. So next slide. So these are all our policy statements. All the ones in green are existing policies, and then the one in yellow is the new proposed policy. So there's some slides where I go through annually where I just highlight some that I think are important, and we'll obviously go through the one in more detail that we're proposing. But I like to go through and kind of highlight some key components of these policies. I won't go through all of them, but I'm going to highlight a few. Obviously, the general fund forecast, we have the Budget Office has a very thorough process around the general fund forecast and provide it to the board 3 times during the year that lays out our resources and key obligations, but also incorporating considerations on long-term liabilities and even capital at some points, and then one-time only resources. So I've noted before, obviously, that the process that we have around the general fund forecast is really strong, and it helps from a bond rating standpoint. And I know that when we do our bond rating presentations, there's a section that Jeff does, and that's always the section they like the most, because Jeff does a really good job, but it's also reflective of that we have a very strong process. We also have a policy statement around tax revenues. So this is laying out our general fund tax revenues, but there's some requirements there around if the county were to evaluate new tax resources, how we go about assessing the process, impact to the economy, impact to the taxpayer base, the complexity of the tax, and the ability to actually administer the tax. So it kind of defines what things we needed to go through to consider a new tax. We also have a policy statement around federal state grants. And so the county gets a lot of grants, as you well know. And so it's important that when we do get grants, that making sure that it fits our mission and values, and that we have cost recovery in terms of administrative costs, and that when we assess these grants, are they longer term? Are they leveraging our general fund rather than us having to put a financial investment into those grants? And so there's a very well laid out policy around that. Then we have a policy statement on recovery and direct costs. This is kind of adjacent to that, making sure that when we do get outside resources, that we have a process to collect on our overhead or administrative costs around managing those resources. And then the next one that I think every year that I've presented on the policies, I highlight this is my favorite policy, because I do think it's the one that sets us aside from a lot of other jurisdictions, is the one around the use of one-time only resources. It's not just me saying this. I think in talking to rating agencies, this is always one they highlight too, is we only use one-time only resource for one-time only expenditures, and that when we do that, we make sure that we fully fund reserves, and that the board can set aside 50% to use for capital. And I noted this during the capital briefing, that I had taken a look at, this was a couple years ago, and I might not have the number right, I don't have it in front of me, but the amount of money that we just on average set aside for capital, if we were to take that and actually would have financed it over a 20-year period, it was around like a savings of interest about $5 million over a 20-year period. So it's pretty significant. In the moment, it doesn't seem like it, but it's pretty significant in terms of saving the county money over time by setting money aside for capital needs. I'm not going to go through user fees and sales and service charges, because there's a briefing after this to talk about that. Obviously, I'm going to talk a little bit more on some slides around our general fund reserve. We set that at 12%. And then we have reserves for other funds, that's supportive housing and preschool for all. We set that up, that policy statement, when those measures passed. And then last year, we added a policy statement from the support of Commissioner Brim Edwards around budget monitoring, where the Budget Office has a process to provide financial information to the board, but also to the public around our budget investments, how we're actually spending by program offer, and that is available, again, to the electeds and to the public. We also added a contract administration policy statement last year that really had to do with, and I have a slide to talk about more in depth, but making sure that the county has consistent standards around how we do contract administration, and making sure that contract administrators across the county are trained adequately around best practices on administering contracts to make sure that we're getting what we need out of our contracts. And obviously there's a grant making policy we'll talk about a little bit more later. I won't talk about the capital asset and transportation planning because I talked about it a little bit during the capital briefing. There's a policy statement around long-term liabilities. We really have two major long-term liabilities. That's our PERS and then our other post-retirement benefits, OPEB liability. Obviously with, I think the Budget Office talked about this, with our PERS, there's not a lot we can do in terms of impacting what's going on because it's driven by labor costs and earnings in the PERS pool. But what you can do is set up side accounts, issue PERS bonds, and in 1999, the county issued a PERS bond, which is rolling off in 2030. At the time when they issued that bond, it was estimated that we're going to get net present value savings of $36 million. I'm not sure we got that, and there's no way for us to confirm that. I'm very excited that those bonds do roll off because they're very significant and they're backloaded with interest. And but the positive thing that we've done over the last couple of years is that we've set up 5 side accounts with PERS for over $125 million. And because of that, we participated in an employer incentive fund with the state, which gave us another additional $12.5 million. That's helped us to kind of mitigate rising costs with PERS. And so I will note that we're always looking at things that we can do around the edges to help that large expenditure and liability. And then on our OPEB side, I mentioned this before, but we have through labor contracts that if you have a certain amount of years of service at the time of retirement, 58 forward, you can essentially get 50% of your medical benefits subsidized until you're eligible for Medicaid or you're 65. And so we have an actuary that does an assessment around that commitment, and we have a liability about $125 million because of that. But the county over the years has essentially tried to fund that liability, and we're about 78% funded on that. And I really consider once you hit 80, you're pretty much fully funded. And so it's a bit really important highlight that what the board has done around that liability exposure there. I'm going to skip the other fund balances, internal service funds, and then investments. Actually, I'm going to just make a note on the investment banking services and cash management. I won't talk about the investment piece, but I will note that in terms of banking services, our policy does say that we have to go out for RFP for banking services every 5 years, and so we do that. The other thing is that we have in our policy statement is that we do not prepay for services or goods. Obviously, there's exceptions to that, but as a general practice, we don't prepay for services and goods. Next one is long-term debt and short-term debt, and there's a slide where I'll talk about that, but the main point here is that obviously we have language around complying to Oregon revised statute in terms of debt limits, but we also have an additional policy limitation on debt, or Christian talked about it yesterday, where our debt service for annually cannot exceed 5% of general funds, and that's making sure that we don't overload the general fund with debt service. And then the last one that I'll note here is conduit debt. This doesn't happen very often, but the county has a hospital facilities authority, and this is allowed through Oregon revised statute, where we can be a conduit of debt through that hospital facilities authority, where if there's a third party that can't get or doesn't have access to issue tax-exempt bonds, they could ask the county through our hospital facilities authority to be a conduit of debt so they can get tax-exempt bonds. There's very defined areas that you can do this with. It's behavioral health treatment facilities. Obviously, it's hospital facilities and then adult care facilities. And we've primarily historically gotten requests from adult healthcare facilities on those requests. And so these are not a liability to Multnomah County. We don't have an obligation to make debt payments, but we can be a conduit. And so our policy kind of lays out when we do get requests, how do we go about that? And it's making sure that does the organization meet our mission and values? Is the organization financially stable to meet those obligations? So we go through a thorough process evaluating their financial situation and amongst other things in that process. And then it has to be approved by the board, and then they have to present on what they're trying to do. So next slide. So now I'm going to ask Brian Smith and Sherry Campbell to come up, but I did want to provide a little bit of context around this policy statement. Is that in 2022, we had a third party, Civic Initiatives, that did an evaluation of our contracting processes. And one of the recommendations they made was around the county considering developing a grant-making process. And so this is kind of that effort that we're pushing forward. The county has historically not been in the space of grant-making. We haven't really done this historically. But over the last couple of years, we've had various instances of doing grant-making. And what I didn't really like around that process, not that we were doing it, but more so that the board hadn't given us authority through an established mechanism with clear criteria, and we didn't have a process that was consistent, transparent, fair, and equitable in terms of how we did grant making. We didn't have a policy, a procedure, we didn't have anything. And so as finance people, we like procedures, rules, and guidelines so we can follow them in a consistent manner. And so we didn't have that. And so I understand that we're in a tough constraint period where maybe grant making doesn't make sense at this point in time. But at the same time, I know that probably will happen in the future at some point. And it's important that we, again, have standards that are consistent, fair, equitable, transparent. And so we're, again, transparent, accountable to the public. And so this is that attempt to do that. So I took advantage of Sherry and her deep knowledge of grants and pulled in Brian Smith, which is deep knowledge around procurements and contracting and state rules and county rules around procuring for services and goods. And I also brought in Will Glasson from the county attorney's office to evaluate from a legal lens as well. And so what we did is kind of put together a grant-making framework that kind of takes into consideration all those things I talked about around procedures and fairness, competitiveness, but also make sure that we build a process that can work through our local marketplace, that is consistent, and then also that when we do award grants that we have a template from a legal perspective that protects the county. And so we've kind of taken all those pieces into this approach. So we have what I refer to as a grant-making framework that's more procedural that I think we shared prior to the session today. And then, but we have a policy statement in our financial and budget policies that points to that framework. But what I'm really looking for this policy statement is it gives us the authority to do this. And so again, if we do this in the future, we have a process that's consistent. So now I'm going to pass it over to Brian.
Good morning. It's good to see you guys here.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Brian Smith. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the county's purchasing manager. I really appreciate the forward-looking nature of this. At the same time, to Eric's point, we've been working on a draft and how do we actually do grant making. Really over the last several years, we've been working on this policy, so it's great to see it finally in front of the board. One of the things that's really important to distinguish is that grant making is a different type of activity under state law than public contracting is. And that's an important distinction and why we haven't heretofore really done grant making as an activity. And the the county has mature rules and systems for public procurement and contracting, and we do it very well. But it has not had that comparable infrastructure for grant making, as it's not an activity that we've historically done. I think this new policy statement helps us set the framework to operationalize how we do grant making and particularly the management of grants once you've made them. It provides direction to the departments for administering grants, and it also envisions a structure where we're leveraging centralized expertise for this activity to ensure success if we do these in the future. And I think to Eric's point, going into tightened budget times, while we may not be doing this anytime soon, I think based on past history and the work that's been put into this, it's really important to get this into our policy so that it's an activity that's supported if the board makes that decision in the future. So the next slide. A little bit on the background. Over the past several years, we've had several requests to let grants into the community for different reasons. And because we haven't had that policy or the rules to let and administer grants, each time this has come up, departments have been called upon to let grants. We've done our best to ensure fairness and transparency through a series of kind of one-off processes. The way this looks in the real world is departments give me a call and say, hey, the board's asked us to do this grant. How do I do this? And we really have tried to leverage our knowledge and experience about how we conduct processes that are fair, open, and transparent to accomplish the goals that have been set for the grant. But we really haven't had that system process to fall back on. And so each time it's been, we've kind of iterated in terms of our experience and practice with how we conduct these. So this new policy really supports that creation of those standardized processes for grant making, as well as it involves configuration for our Moltco Marketplace and Workday systems to specifically support the grant making as a function. And I'd like to pass it off to Sherry to speak to some of the specific work we've done to develop the policy and the experiences that we've had in some of our recent pilot processes.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Sherry Campbell, she, her pronouns, and I'm really excited to be here. I just want to say, I was listening to Eric and Brian, and I just want to honor the fact that they have put up with me bringing my very strong program lens to these conversations now for 3 years, and we've all grown, and I think this policy framework reflects that tension that I think we all feel whenever we want to do good work, and we only have so much money. So I just want to thank them for inviting me into this conversation and sticking with us, and here we are today. So that's the project timeline. But I worked on the draft and pinged Brian all the time on it, starting for 2 years. And we had a draft framework by last year, early 2025, kept tweaking it, and then we finally, we had an opportunity to pilot it, and then did some changes after that, after the grant, and we'll go through those grants in a second. So it really has been, tested. It's been reviewed by Stephen around contracts, by Will, legal, Brian and I can't tell you how many times it's been passed back and forth between he and I and Eric. So it really has had a very strong lens on it to kind of help make it real. And then we did our first pilot in 25, and we are finalizing it now. So next slide. And this is what I've loved. I have to say, writing the framework was interesting. It was very excellent. I've loved watching it come to life. And I want to thank all of you for giving us the opportunity to do some pilots. And I know money is tight, but on the other hand, the product you're getting today really benefits from those opportunities. And so, as Brian said, there's been many grants, particularly since the pandemic. These are the three that we have literally followed the framework. And then the framework has been evolved from those. The first one was the Community Vitality Grant that happened, we did in 2025. And, quick overview of that, we had 51 applications for that. It's hard, saying we served 8,460 individuals is probably an estimate, but that I think it's really, it's supportable with the data that I got from our awardees. And 100% of the grant requirements were met. And I do have a final report. It got lost in the shuffle of doing some other things, but it's really inspiring. And then the last two, the elections and Multnomah Sanctuary Fund, those are both in process. So I just, these are different and the same. And in that the community people, the organizations that have applied for these grants are just so eager to show what they can do in the community, and their creativity shows in their applications. And that's been fabulous. On the other hand, and I say to them very clearly, we are a bureaucracy, and we are using the residents' funds to make this happen, so we need to know that it actually did happen. And they've been so eager to figure out how to do that. And so, but I will tell you that we are using MMP. It is an imperfect system, I think probably for procurement, but it is certainly an imperfect system for grants, but we're using it, and I can say to you honestly that I'm glad. I couldn't have said that honestly to you before. So, I'm won over because I see the value of having it, and I see the amount of work that it takes to support these organizations, to be fair to them so they can succeed.
And I just want to MMP is Multnomah Marketplace.
Yes,
okay.
I'm sorry, yes, sorry. And a year ago, I would have been, excuse me? So it's kind of, I have all these notes, and of course I'm not reading them, so the elections project was in the budget last year. I have worked so closely with DCS, and it's been exactly what we envisioned in the framework, which is my working with them, helping them see how it's the same and different, really working hard to support the applicants, and now it's in the contracting stage. And we continue to meet to talk about what's worked, what hasn't worked, what can we do differently, what's within, the limits of what we can do, what's outside, is it a change, how can we do this? But I'm very excited. It is only serving individuals in East County and non-incorporated, so it really, it's very customized to the needs of that community. And it's the mentorship, the partnership between my role and DCS has been amazing. The Multnomah Sanctuary Fund, which you all created in December and wanted to see it in pockets of people tomorrow, and tomorrow was about, well, no, pockets, it's not. It was on the street in about 7 weeks, which might sound slow, but it didn't feel slow when we were doing it, especially since Christmas was in the middle of that. And that is currently in the contracting stage. We had 40 applications. They were so different and diverse. And I want to thank, the chairs off, well, Garrett and Solomé, for, really being a part of crafting that to make sure that your intent was embedded in the instructions. And it was exciting to see it operationalized. And we had 40 applications, 8 awards, and those, they'll be final. I think next week we'll have the contracts out. That is world record speed. And I have to say that the contracting staff have been amazing. So in terms of what, the lessons we've learned, first of all, grants are not a time saver. And I think that that's been everybody's hope since we started doing grants, is let's get this money out. Procurement's too slow. And I can honestly say it isn't, because we still have to do it right. And we need to get the money to the right places. And we have to support particularly these small businesses and nonprofits. And I think that's the biggest lesson that we're continuing to learn, is the amount of support they deserve. Once we've made a decision to give them these funds and say the board is asking you to do this in the community, that's the easy part. The hard part is them doing that work and having the tools and the knowledge to be able to give us a final report that meets our needs and expectations. And I think that's a requirement. If we're going to do this, we need to support them in their success. I think we're still working on how we can kind of soften the bureaucratic pieces of this, and I'm sure that Brian and I will have some more conversations as I learn more, yeah. And that's okay. We're good at this now, and I think everybody's going to benefit from that tension. We also want to mention that we are offering debriefs to any organization that did not get funded, and as they request. We're not doing, we're not automatically setting them up, and I am so impressed with the eagerness of these organizations to learn more about what it means and why they didn't get selected. And again, it's time, but I think it's also empowering the community to do the work that we want them to do in the way we need them to do it. And I'm sure I missed some other points, but that.
Yeah. I'm still in denial. She's leaving. So, but yeah. So thank you. I did want to just note that in the policy statement that for us to go through this process, it has to be budgeted in the annual budget process. And I think another important note is that a traditional procurement for services versus grant, there's some nuance. It's kind of difficult in terms of determining that. I think the important piece, if you were to approve this, again, we have a process, but it's important that as the board makes decisions and investments, it's more important around the investment. We will kind of filter it through the right process that it needs to go through in terms of this grant making framework. So, thanks. Go to the next slide, please. So I'm pivoting a little bit here, but kind of a little bit, kind of still same area. This is around contract administration. Again, I shared that in 2022, we had a third party that did assessment on our contracting processes. And one of the things that they highlighted as a must versus a nice to have was developing a consistent contract administration process. So that's not reflective. The county didn't do that. It just didn't do it in a consistent manner. So we developed a contract administration. We hired some staff that were dedicated to this effort. We built a contract administration manual. We trained folks across the organization, a curriculum around contract administration that follows best practices. So that stuff's done. So I just wanted to highlight that. And then we obviously created a policy statement that kind of memorializes that. But some of the things that we continue to work in that space is around contract deliverables. So this is the process of making sure that every contract has deliverables or maybe obligations, another description of it, to what's actually coming out of the contract, right? And so what we've been working on is a process to essentially take our active contracts and then have a process to make sure that they're being tracked systematically around the deliverables or obligations, and then being able to report on these obligations. And this is an important piece around, again, what contract are they tied to? What are they? When are they being complete? Who's responsible for them? For us to have visibility on those to make sure that we are getting what we want out of our contracts. And so we continue to work through that. And I know that some of you have been big advocates around making sure that does happen. And so I wanted to give a highlight on that. The other piece too that, again, to my point that I'm in denial that Sherry's leaving, is that she has started a process around technical assistance. So this is, we know that we've talked about this a lot over the last couple of years around, we work with a lot of small community-based organizations or community-based organizations that are newer to the county or newer to government in general. And so where maybe they don't have the right infrastructure, the right know-how to manage county dollars or even manage state or federal dollars. And so I do think that from my vantage point that the county does have responsibility or contracting out, that we also help providers that are in those situations with technical assistance. And I think technical assistance can kind of vary in terms of what it is. It could be somebody needs help on developing a cost allocation plan to understand their costs to cover their overhead costs, their administrative costs. It could be that a provider needs support around, what are the things you need to be mindful when receiving federal dollars, or how do you procure with the government? How do you contract with the government? How do you meet insurance requirements? Those kinds of things. And so what I wanted to do is go through a process to essentially qualify outside parties, because there's a lot of vendors out there that do this work, where we could essentially work with our county departments. But when there's instances where providers do need support, is that we can refer them to these qualified entities to give them the right technical assistance. So we're working on that process. It's kind of part of our bigger contracts improvement effort. And then the last thing that I'll note, this is more minor, but I think this is one thing that Commissioner Ben Edwards was pushing for, which I think is really good, is that we did add some language in the policies that, and we're working on the report, Commissioner, that we'll share with all the commissioners in coming months. But we'll be providing a report that will detail all our active contracts by department, by contract type, contract number, supplier, contract term, and some spending information on those contracts. So, yeah. Well, a form, yeah. And so, yeah. So it is I appreciate, Commissioner, you bringing that up in prior cycles, and we did add that as now a requirement that we'll do, and we are working to do that. And so we'll obviously shop that around to, does that meet needs, and obviously guide you in terms of that visual and what it brings. So just wanted to note that. Next slide. So I'm going to speed it up, but going through reserves, Christian and Jeff talked about this yesterday, so my apologies, it's really repetitive. But obviously we have a reserve for general fund. It's set at 12%. We also have an additional business income tax stabilization reserve set at 12%. And then we have other fund reserves for preschool for all set at 15%, and then supportive housing at 10%. Obviously supportive housing is currently not in this budget, hasn't replenished its reserves, but also understanding the financial situation they're in. I understand it, and there's a plan to replenish that over a 3-year window. I keep telling Antoinette and reminding her, but obviously we're in a tough picture. But she hears me. So, but again, I think the next piece is super important. I know Christian or Jeff and Christian talked about this, But again, the purpose of these reserves and what the policy says, that we use it really to guard against large fluctuations in our general fund resources, or obviously the BIT stabilization, the BIT, is to really guard against that and to make sure that when those, if there was a big miss, that we don't have to make substantial cuts in the moment. You have time to adjust, and being very rigid in how we use it is good for stability, not only in the short term, but the long term, and again, follows best practices and helps with our overall bond rating. Again, want to really stress that. The board obviously set in fiscal year 2023 a multi-year commitment to increase the general fund reserve from 10 to 15%, because we're still, best practice would be more around 15%. We're a little short of that. And so obviously we're not in the conditions right now to do that, but when the opportunities come forward, I'd highly recommend that we get up to 15%. But again, to my point earlier, we manage it very well. We manage it very well. So next slide. I'll speed it up. I shared this during the capital briefing, some of our debt limits. We have a policy around debt limitations. There's obviously statutory limits. What's up on there, the slide, is the amounts that are on there are what we have available. We would never get to that level, but again, they're ordered by statute limitations, so we have to make sure that we're reporting on that. But the main piece of the policy is that, again, our annual debt services, the amounts we pay on an annual basis cannot exceed 5% of general funds. That is the main component of that policy. And then we also, when we do issue debt, we usually try to attach it to the life of the asset. We usually go no more than 20 years. There's occasions where we've gone to 30 years. A good example is at the courthouse, has a longer useful life, but we tend to really live in that 20-year window. And then if there's opportunities for refinancing where there's net present value savings of 3%, we try to refinance existing debt. Obviously with interest rates right now, it's really not an opportunity for that, but we did refinance the Sellwood Bridge bonds in 2021, and we saved almost like $10 million over the term of the bonds. And then we have a interfund loan policy statement that allows for interfund loans for 1-year cash flow issues. This is timing issues of getting, maybe a program's going to get a payment from an outside resource, but there's a timing difference. We can give essentially a cash loan for 1 year, and then you can do interfund loans for capital for up to 10 years. And we did one for the Dunthorpe district not too long ago for the pump station. Next slide. Christian kind of went through this yesterday. I went through this as a capital briefing too, but this is an updated one to reflect the budget. This is a snapshot, and this is in the policy document, and we'll update it every year. This is the debt that's subject to the policy, and debt supported by general fund. And looking at the very top, there's a column for the outstanding principal balance as of the end of this fiscal year, end of 26. And then to the far right of that is the annual debt service for fiscal year 27. That's what we have to pay. And so there's a line that says total debt subject to the financial policy, and you go to all the way to the right, it's 23.5 million. And then that's the total amount that's subject to the policy. But then we have debt service that's outstanding that is supported by outside resources. So the vehicle registration fee supports the Sellwood Bridge bonds, the Burnside Bridge. And so you get down to $10 million after you take those out. Then we have a subsidy from the IRS on one of our debt issues. And then we have some fees for fines, court fines that support our courthouse. And then we get down to 9.1 million that's subject to the policy. Come back to the bottom part of that sheet, and you see the total general fund revenues, 783 times 5%, you get 39.1 million, and then you take out what's currently being used. You have available just under 30 million, and if I were to issue debt over a 20-year window with the 5.7% interest rate, we could bond around 355 million. We're only using about 23% of our capacity within the debt limit. So again, this is just reflective of that we've done a very good job around keeping debt levels low. This shows your capacity you do have. Obviously, not encouraging to issue debt, but obviously trade-offs with that, but again, I'll continue to note this every year. So next. And one other thing that I'll just note, this does not reflect all our debt service because there's debt that's not subject to the policy. GO bonds are not subject to the policy because you're getting a new revenue source to pay for that. Those library bonds roll off in fiscal year 2029, and we structured those bonds to essentially set up a potential phase 2. And that's why it's a shorter term. I think the term was only like 9 years for those bonds. They get paid off pretty quickly. And then our PERS bond, which I'm really excited about, that rolls off in 2030. Very large payments that we have there. And then our Selwood Bridge bonds roll off in 2033. And those are supported by vehicle registration fees. Next slide. So this is just a visual of, again, debt that's supported by the general fund. I think it's important to just highlight, again, the amounts that are subject every year. This is from 26 to 46. And so in 2030, our full faith and credit 2010B rolls off, and that's about 1.7 million that rolls off. And then in 2037, a portion of our Series 2017 bonds rolls off for the Health Department headquarters in the DCJ East Campus. That's about a little bit over 3 million that rolls off. And then our courthouse doesn't roll off until 2047, and that's about $4 million. So just shows you kind of a timeline of when those debt services that are being supported by the general fund, when they roll off from a time scale. Next slide. And then I'm going to pivot to investment portfolio, and I'll speed it up again. Again, this is now pivoting to the investment policy. We're not recommending any changes here. We're just doing reference updates. I've shared with the board before is that our policy really is centered around setting the parameters of how we invest in our investment portfolio. And one of the key pieces is that we don't invest in stocks and equities. We primarily invest in U.S. Treasuries, agencies, corporate bonds, municipal bonds, CDs, money markets, demand deposits. And so we again, in alignment with Oregon Revised Statute, they're pretty safe investments. And then even for like corporate bonds, they have to be rated at a certain level for us to even invest in them. And then when we set up CDs, they have to be with banks that are collateralized. So we have backing in case something does happen. And so very safe investments. We have overarching goals or principles in our investment portfolio, and they follow safety, liquidity, and yield. And they go in that order. Safety is making sure that we preserve capital. So when we invest, we don't sell at a loss. And a good example is that if I were to buy a U.S. Treasury today and then interest rates shoot up tomorrow, that security, if I were to go sell it in the market, could have a lost market value, and I might take a loss if I sell it, right? But if I hold that to maturity, I still get my coupon payment. So I don't sell that, and I just still make my money, right? I'm preserving the capital. Now, there's instances where I could buy same U.S. Treasury today, and then rates go down a lot tomorrow. I could sell that as gain in the market. We sometimes do that, but and that's, again, we're getting a gain out of it, but only when the conditions are met. So we rarely do that as well. Again, our really focus is maintaining preservation of that capital. Then next item is liquidity, making sure that we can obligations. So we always meet our obligations, always. And so making sure we pay our PERS payments, our tax payments, our payroll, our AP runs, all those things that we have to pay. And so what we usually do, and I've shared this with the board, is that we're a county, a lot of counties do this, is that we're investing money as it comes in every day. And what we usually do is we wait for property tax season, and we essentially plot out investments throughout the year because we get a lot of influx of cash during that period. And then we invest out the whole next year. So we have maturities at certain dates to meet certain obligations. And the reason we do that is obviously we have a good idea what we're going to have to pay. And then anything beyond that that we don't need in the next year, we can invest out further to essentially squeeze some more interest off of that. But it is an important piece because we still have to meet our obligations. So, and obviously the county is a big organization. Our investment portfolio average is about $1.8 billion in value. And then we maximize yield. That's the last priority. And so we do not invest in fossil fuels. That's in policy. And then last year we added a component there where we do ESG investing for corporate debt, and that's environmental, social, and governance. So they have to meet a certain score for us to invest in a corporate bond. And then we have an established benchmark of 0 to 5 Bank of America Merrill Lynch benchmark to make sure that we're comparing to something in terms of performance, and we always meet that benchmark. And then we have an investment advisory board. This is a board made up of individuals from the community that we meet with quarterly to review our investment performance and compliance to the policy as well. And then we do have a non-discretionary investment advisor that helps us with compliance strategy in our investment portfolio, and also gives us access to certain investments in the market prior to we would know, which is really advantageous for us. We manage the portfolio in 2 buckets. We have a liquidity bucket, which is stuff that we have to pay in the next year. So it's shorter term investments, and then we have a core fund that's further out in terms of investments. And we can only go out to 5.25 years, and we have a weighted average maturity of 2.5 years. And to the right of that, you'll see on the top just a reflection of our investments as at the end of fiscal year 25, just the breakout. So we primarily invest in government securities, and then you can see a breakdown of our liquid assets that we have. So next slide. So this is just a quick snapshot of, I shared this last year as well. This is the blue bars are our average portfolio balance by year, by fiscal year, and then the orange line is our, the average balance is the blue bars, and then the orange is our actual earnings. And so a couple things here to note is that we're really subject to interest rate changes. It's just the way it is, because our focus is preserving capital. It's not, making huge money off the market, because you can also lose a lot, and so we don't want to lose. So, interest rates were really low before. So I guess I want to note that we didn't really become really good at investing in 2022 to 23. It's just that interest rates shot up. We're at historical lows in 2020 and 21, and then interest rates shot up, so our investments portfolio started making a lot more interest in terms of overall interest, but it shot up substantially. In terms of the blue bars going up from 20 to all the way through 24, 25, is primarily that during that time frame, we issued the GO bonds for the library. We had a bunch of ARPA, CARES money come in. We also had those 2 new tax initiatives, and so it's really shot up the value of our portfolio. Obviously, we spent out CARES money and ARPA money, but again, with those tax programs, it's really brought up our average portfolio balance pretty substantially. So, and I just a quick note, this is through 25. The Fed has made multiple cuts over the last 2 years. I think with inflation coming back up a bit, that some of that downward trend of interest rates may not happen the way I thought, so they may stay a little bit higher than expected. But again, with this Fed, you never know. And Jerome Powell's ending this term in May, so it's kind of a roller coaster, right? Yeah, there you go. I hope he stays. Next slide. So I'm getting toward the end, but other financial tools that we use, obviously we have an external financial audit every year that's audit of financial statements, audit of internal controls, and then we have an audit of our federal expenditures. And then we have, obviously, our auditor, Jennifer's office, does performance audits. And so we always, recommendations we could take from both of those are always kind of thought through in terms of our policies. We always look at, seems like the Governmental Accounting Standards Board always issues new accounting standards. But But if there's anything that we need to think about in terms of incorporating, we think about it. But we do want to make sure that our policies are always policies that the board has direct authority over. We don't want to throw in stuff that you don't have authority over. So just because there's a new accounting standard doesn't mean we're going to add a new policy statement, but there might be some things that might force us to alter some things. Then we have administrative procedures. These are more operational directives designed to standardize process. We have facilities administrative procedures, we have financial administrative procedures, procurement and risk procedures. And then we have best practices that we don't have in writing. I think I'll just give an example of this is, so when we make payments, one of the methods we can use is wires. Wires are really dangerous. We usually use them for settlements. So we don't use wires to just pay, for some goods. This is when we settle a legal settlement or we issue bonds and we're trying to close out. And so when we do this, we have somebody that initiates and somebody that approves, always. And then usually when we do settlements, there's an attorney involved, always. And so we may be working with Will Glasson or Carlo or Carlos in the attorney's office, and we may be going back and forth on our email. When we do a wire, we always pick up the phone or walk over them and say, did you actually send this? Is it actually you that's approving this request? And thinking those are best practices that we use, because once a wire is gone, you cannot pull it back. And so they're really, really dangerous. Versus an ACH, you can always pull back. Next slide.
Before you move on to this slide, can I ask you a question?
Yep.
About the audits? And this is more like sort of accountability within the organization. So yesterday, we got a letter from the auditor about some fiscal controls in the, what's the joint office now, the Homeless Services Department, about some two recommendations that were around fiscal controls. Would that be centrally applied, or is that decentralized, and that is implementing the recommendation on a fiscal control, is that a decentralized responsibility?
So glad you asked that question. Right now, I mean, not knowing the specific things, I'd kind of have to, put it through that lens. What does it apply? But usually, when these recommendations come forward and they're applied to a specific department, the focal point is addressing that in the department. Obviously, I think central is usually at some point part of the process, and then we can assess whether that makes sense to apply it somewhere else, because you don't know if another department has the same issue. Having said that, we're moving to a shared services model, where I think when these things come up, it's much easier for us to apply across the board, because they have consistent standards across the organization. And so right now, it's a case by case, whether it's applied across the board. I would say that right now it's much harder to apply across the board versus in a future state with a shared services model, where we're all doing it the same way, so you can apply it across the organization, irregardless of the department. So,
Do you know about the specific instance,
So
whether that
I'm not.
or like is it protocol that those things roll up to the centrally, or do they stay in the department currently?
So the recommendation or the
Around fiscal controls?
they're usually, so if I understand your question correctly, is that central finance sets procedures around fiscal management for the organization, kind of general oversight. And so usually if there is a recommendation, it's central that's assessing it and applying it down. But again, every department's slightly different at a lower level. So it could be that specific change or needed change is very specific to department that maybe some other department doesn't have, right? They're doing it a different way. And so I guess what I'm saying is, in this particular case, depending on what it is, we would take it centrally and apply it back down. But we work really closely with that department.
Okay, thank you.
a few more slides.
Yeah. Okay, next slide. Just one part back. Go back one. I'll speed it up, sorry, Chair. Yeah, I tend to take my time, I'm sorry. So reviewing existing policies, we always look at other jurisdictions. Again, are they relevant, new accounting pronouncements? Future topics for consideration, I'm really laser focused on that contracts obligation piece. So as we develop a process to track that, report on it, have oversight, we probably want to incorporate some language in our policies. And then we're always doing general policy refinement. And then again, this is a board document, so always ideas of the board, please share them with myself, Christian and Jeff, glad to take a look at them. And then I'm always looking at what rate agencies are saying. Like, what are they saying, what are they highlighting? I like when they highlight things that we do well, which is good. And then I just note there that we had a maintenance review in 2025. Next slide. So in summary, policies reflect the board's direction, align with GFOA best practices, and we use them in conjunction with other financial tools, and it's a continuous process improvement. And then we're, again, asking for approval of the grant-making policy framework. And then I'm just gonna go to one other slide, and then I'll open up for questions. If you go to the next slide. This is our outstanding debt here, all our outstanding debt. So looking from left to right, there's a date when we issued the debt, there's when they're gonna mature, the average interest rate on that debt, the amount that was issued, that standing principal at the end of this year, the outstanding principal at the end of next year, and then the debt payments for next fiscal year by interest and principal. So it goes through each of those by pension, general obligation, and full faith and credit. We don't have any outstanding loans, but this breaks down each of our obligations. Again, just wanted to show it to you. The one highlight I'll show you is that on the PERS bond, if you go to the far right, you see an interest column and a principal. You see the interest at $32 million. That was because that debt was backloaded with interest. So we have large debt payments the last couple of years, but we're almost done paying that debt. So now I'll open up for questions.
Thank you so much, Eric. Really appreciate this walkthrough through so many really important pieces of our financial policies for the county. So I'll go to the board for questions. I'll start with Commissioner Jones-Dixon.
Yeah, no questions, just,
Oh, yeah, sorry.
just a comment. I appreciate you, Mr. Ariano, learning so much as far as like the controls and just our future, so thank you for positioning us well. And my office will be following up regarding the grant-making process, so thank you for your leadership, Sharon, coming back, and you as well, Mr. Brown.
And as Commissioner Singleton noted, this is just a work session. I just rolled into the board, the board meeting cadence, so yeah, we can open it up for questions from the board.
Cadence and order, you like that?
I have a question about, I just didn't see it. If you were going to look at our various investment performances, I understand not all of them are like annual, but could you come up with like overall we're averaging X return per year?
Yeah, I can definitely provide, we have that.
Okay.
I'm glad to share that, yep. And we do, just if I wasn't clear, we do have a benchmark, like a standard benchmark. The Merrill Lynch B of A 0 to 5 is a marker, just to see, again, this industry standard. We also do compared to other jurisdictions, just because we like to. But again, every jurisdiction is it's different. Every jurisdiction is different, so it's not apples to apples, but we still do. So.
I just had one thank you just for this thorough overview, but also the work on grant making. I know that was a lot, and it's a big ask of government to shift the way it does work, but it felt really critical, and so thank you for the work that you've done there. The last draft of the contract manager's manual that I saw, I think we talked a little bit about there was some soft skills about it missing, and I don't know that it all needs to be in the manual, but talking about training other folks, I think it's some of the soft skills that we heard Sherry talk about in working with organizations as partners and making it so that when they need technical assistance, they're actually uplifting that instead of feeling like they have to hide issues they might be having. I'm curious if that's been something that's been incorporated or how you all are approaching some of those soft skills that are needed for that work.
Commissioner, we have not yet, but I do hear you. I think there's a lot of good things in that manual, but again, it follows kind of these best practices. Sometimes they're high level or into the weeds, and I do think we can definitely take a look at how to take some of that and make it more usable for different audiences, for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. And this may be a larger question that just needs to get into the parking lot, which is fine. But I know for SHS, there's been some conversation about regional contracting standards so that our contractors our providers who are working in multiple counties don't have multiple different reporting requirements and contract language. And so just curious in an update on that work and if it feels like it will fit with, I think, frankly, we have the most complicated because we have so many different funding sources. So hoping ours is being used as kind of that starting place.
Yeah, no, Commissioner, I don't know where that's at. What I will say is I think conversations with you and brief conversations with Antoinette is that, and actually Brian too, we would love to be part of like where we're being a leader in that space where we can, because I think we have some pretty good process and experience and history. Where we can help some of that standardization across the jurisdictions. Not to say we're the best in every area, but I do think we have some really good things that other jurisdictions could benefit from. And I do hear you, there's some sometimes big differences between jurisdictions and how things are laid out, which I can understand for a small organization or just a regular size organization. There's a lot of administrative excess to it that we could do better.
Yeah, thank you. I think those were, and we can just keep following up, Eric, as that conversation continues.
that'd be great.
At
Yep.
SHS for sure.
Yep.
Thanks.
A few questions, and one of them is just something I've been thinking about and just keep forgetting to ask you and Brian about. So a while ago, as we're having conversations about contracting practices at the county, I know that you had sent out like a slide set or something that they were starting to have conversations at the state level on state contracting policies. And this was a while ago, and I hadn't heard any updates. I don't know if that conversation at the state level got dropped, but I know like one of the things that they had been talking about at the state level was the ability to prepay some, providers through contracting. And I know that the conversation was if the state goes in this direction, that make it easier for us to actually take up some of those practices for alignment. So do you know where those conversations went at the state level, if anywhere?
I don't know if they've gone much further than where I think we had a briefing too. There were some very clear recommendations, but if you want to come up, Brian, too. But I'll be honest with you, Chair, it did seem I think they made some good recommendations, but from my vantage point, they didn't have a lot of teeth in terms of next steps. I do think that, for example, you referenced the prepaying. I think those types of things for us to do it more universal requires the state to do it for them to come back down to everybody, or even the feds to do it, right? And so I think those do demand a bigger state involvement and leadership around this. But I know to be fair, I don't remember off the top of my head, but they did have a schedule in terms of kind of the next steps, but there wasn't anything definitive on taking action on these recommendations. I do know that shortly after that back and forth with Multnomah County, I did get a lot of outreach from the Nonprofit Association of Oregon around like, hey, we heard you were doing this. I think it would be a good opportunity for you to take a leadership role. One of the things we talked about was grant making, for example, because the state doesn't have very clear rules around that. And anyways, anything?
There've been turnover in several positions, key positions at the state as well, so I'm not aware that there's anything that's been done on that, so.
I mean, I think it's worth having that conversation because it's something that we hear about from providers as a challenge, and I think that that is something, especially if we're talking about how we can work regionally to see like how can we also bring the state into that conversation and that work.
And I think as well that we're continuing to be open to those kinds of things, and there are areas where we've been cooperating quite a bit more with other jurisdictions. The procurement on a lot of the homeless system services providers, where we've been doing joint procurements now for several years with Clackamas and Washington County to kind of relieve the burden on many of those providers. So contracting is next.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. My other question was, just, so I don't know that we have grants right now. I just want to make sure that we're covering if there's any staffing that's needed to help manage grants, either in the finance department or within departments, like because you guys talked about kind of the policy, which is great, and then how do we actually make sure that we've got the capacity to implement that?
Yeah,
yeah.
That's a good question, Chair. Aside from me, the denial about Sherry leaving is not going to be a plan. That's still my plan right now. No, I think I'm trying to, hopefully, I know Sherry's going to retire, but she's willing to continue to help us in some capacity. But I'm really kind of eyeing the shared services project. And so I think we're going to talk about it during the DCM briefing, but and I'll talk a little bit about approach to have more specifics around what we're doing. But one of the, we're doing it in a phased approach. And one of the areas we're going to do is grants management. And so as part of that shared services process, it's obviously taking what we do in departments now, kind of having one way of doing it, but it's also an opportunity to kind of make our grant management across the county more robust across the board. And I'm eagerly trying to add some stuff to it. But anyways, I think that process might give us some opportunity to identify some resource and timing to essentially fill that role. Obviously with Sherry's guidance around what's the best, skill level, what we need with the position that she's been helping me on. Yeah, but yes, I do need that.
Okay, great. I wanted to make note of that. And then I think the last thing that I have is I appreciate the walkthrough of the different types of bonds that we have, the different types, and of course, like the limitations that we have through our policies and how much we can, and it's great that we're nowhere near. But one of the things that has come up in conversation is around the MODA Center and how we're paying for that and the dollars that were being used. And one thing that isn't listed here is the OCC bonds. And because that doesn't go through the county, that is actually we as a board, and not this board, but a board of the past, put forward the revenue mechanism to get that, but that is actually a pot of money that then it shows up on the VDF trust board. And so I just wanted to if you could talk about that a little bit, because I think understanding how we're going to be planning to use those dollars in the future, at least that's what's being discussed right now.
Yeah, Chair, you're correct. What I shared is not reflective of, I guess, what you describe as indirect commitments that we have that are paying off debt service. So within the VFIGA, the VDF trust, we have through the IGA, we have essentially obligation to support, or at least our motor vehicle rental tax surcharge of 2.5% flows through the trust, and it's tied to the timing of fully retiring the Oregon Convention Center bonds, which roll off in 2030. So that obligation is not, we didn't issue the debt. It's not our debt obligation, but our revenue source is tied to retiring that debt. And so, as you laid out, Chair, we can't get out of that right now, but as soon as that fully matures, then we no longer have that obligation to the Oregon Convention Center bonds. So that surcharge, the revenue from that surcharge becomes available. And that's essentially what we have taken to make a commitment to issue bonds for the MODA Center. But those funds, again, would not be available until after 2030 because of that commitment through the VFIGA.
Okay, great, thank you. Right. Did you have any more questions? I know you had asked a couple.
Oh, I do. Oh, sorry. You can go ahead and ask your questions, but I do have a couple of additional ones, but I also wanted just to note that we're talking about commitments of the bonds, and we actually haven't gotten any of the requirements in writing that we put in place for those bonds. So from my perspective, there is not a commitment until we get the things that we laid out, just because we haven't had a public discussion, and I want to just,
Yeah.
I don't want to leave the impression that there was some deal that was made that,
I didn't agree to the conditions even.
So,
that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying. There's no,
yeah, I just, there was a lot of questions about, as we were talking about our budget, about the funding source for potential uses. Anything, like, there's no decisions that have been made by this board or this
Yeah.
body that are absolutely required before we move forward, but there were questions about what dollars were actually being talked about, and so that's what I wanted him to get at the root of.
Yeah, and my apologies if I.
that's okay.
kinda-
It was-
There's
but
nothing that
made it
we've
sound like
actually
there'd been some deal.
legally tied to anything. Yep, yep. All verbal, right? Except for those we have, yeah.
So I do have a question, but go ahead and ask yours. I just wanted to make sure that I got that statement in.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump. But I did have a question about our ability to make fiscal policy related to contracting versus state law, and what is the wiggle room, or the distinction between those. One of the questions I am curious about as we talk about things like economic development, of things like, can the board have a fiscal policy where we might weight different proposals, or I'll use the word bids because I'm from construction, but with factors like, well, it's local and it has a higher, and I keep forgetting the word for when money stays locally and cycles versus sending it away. So it has benefit, and therefore we're going to take some of that like local stimulating benefit into account and give a weight to potentially a local supplier versus a not local supplier. Like, can we, within public contracting law in Oregon, come up with any of our own criterion related to who we procure from or how we evaluate those bids coming in?
That's a big question, Commissioner. And the answer is, in general, we have, there's the Public Procurement Code, and then we do have programs, there's a variety of social programs that are in law and in policy that overlay those. So, for example, Oregon Forward as a state program, which ensures that there are opportunities for individuals with disabilities. And state law says if one of these firms can meet our requirements for goods or services, we are obligated to use them, period. There's no competition. We go straight forward. And so that's a good example of something that's actually built into state law. We've got other programs that the board has approved in the past, the Construction Diversity Equity Fund, that do particular kinds of things, and actually overlays for procurements. Our Good Faith Effort program, that's a longstanding that the board has had, as well as our Per 8, which is sustainability and social equity policy. It's a policy that came from this board and is created an administrative rule, and we implement it through our procurement. We give points on RFPs that are because of that. So our standard is 25% of the points are on sustainability and social equity factors on best value, RFPs and RFPQs. So those are the kinds of examples where, yes, there are mechanisms to be able to do that. Local preference policy, there is a state statute that gives local preference to Oregon firms. In practice, geographically, where we're at, that means a firm in Medford is local, a firm in Vancouver is not. I've only seen that work out once in my career here, where we ended up having kind of made a strange thing. But so that's the existing preference policy. So that is an area we certainly can explore.
I think, just to build on that, though, we had to take action to do like a special procurement around Walnut Park, correct?
Yes, yeah.
So that, there's things that aren't in policy like that could be, or we have to do, and we have to take action to make an
Yeah, and that particular part of the purchasing code is for construction projects that operate not as a low bid kind of project where we want to accomplish some other things as well. That's the mechanism where it does come before the board, and we tell you how we're going to do it.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. One, I love this tile slide with all the current policy statements. And I tried to go into, this is maybe like a web question, so I don't know if it's you, but I was like, oh, great, where would like a member of the public see like what our policy is relating to contract administration? Do these all exist somewhere that's public facing, like not in the Commons, in one place? If they don't, I think it would be great if they did.
No.
Just because, okay.
They do not.
Do they appear mostly in the Commons, so like more internal facing look?
And I'm assuming you're.
Let's see, like if I could ask a question to generate,
Yeah, and I'm assuming you're referring to like, the contracts administration manual. Where is that? Is there a central place where you can access that for the public? Is that what you're?
yeah, well,
As opposed to the actual financial budget policies? Because the financial budget
I
policy.
love this because
Yeah.
it seemed like, hey, we have all these
Yeah.
sort of structures in place that guide our work. And so and they're called policies, so I was just wondering, like, are these all someplace the public can see? It kind of goes back to like the fact one, where I was like, or not the fact one, but the disposal of surplus property, where it was sort of in Commons, but the general public couldn't see it?
Yeah, so the financial and budget policies are part of the budget document, and so it's in the budget that's available to the public. I think if you're referring to the specific, more granular, like, again, if there's another manual or policy that's referenced there, could it be tied or be linked up? I think we can make sure. I think most of them have links, but if they don't, we can check. If I'm understanding you correctly.
So, yes, for the record, Christian Elkin, County Budget Director, I use she, her pronouns. All of the financial and budget policies are published with each adopted budget. So there's a distinct link on our website that says financial and budget policies so that we know what you've adopted, so they're part of that budget adoption document.
So like all these squares, somewhere in the budget document.
There's one document for all of our financial and budget policies
And
that
these are all
represent
in
those
there.
squares, correct.
Okay.
And there's data behind them too, like if we're meeting the policy, all those things.
So during budget season, people look at for that, it's just our website's hard to find things. Do they exist outside of the budget process somewhere other than in the budget? Or are they all over the
Not
place?
today. Well, they're all in one document, so those are contained in the adopted document. Then at each stage, so like in the proposed stage right now, what's up there, it says, these are the policies adopted by the board last year. They will be updated when the board adopts them again. Eric could probably make a reference on his website to point people in that direction, if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, I'm more like again, I think we have some great tools and we have more than when I got on the board. But like, how do people know? Our website it's just hard to navigate. So like I say, I was just typing in, like trying to find it, and you can't, there's, I don't know, like 300 things that come up when I type in one of these words.
But
So maybe that's the,
But like Christian said, there is a specific link to it, but the version that I'm sharing with you today is proposed. That's why that's not available currently. But if you were to approve it as part of the adoption, then that would be available for the public.
okay, thank you. That was one question, and I think you might have answered this once before, but I just want to make sure. So there's a reference to, this is under our investments. We do not invest in fossil fuels. I think I'm going to ask you if we have an ESG policy or an environment, social, and governance policy around our investments. Is it that we're already very limited in the, looks like the only ones that would apply to is the corporate notes, that those, was the answer you gave me before, that's a very limited subset?
Yeah, so, because the state requires that if we invest in corporate notes, that they have to be rated at a certain level. And also have in mind that not everybody's issuing at one time, right? And so if again, it's a moving target, but on average, on those corporate lists that meet the rating requirement, there's only like maybe less than 20 that we could invest in. And then you apply ESG, and that brings it down a little bit more. And then who's issuing, right? So I'm not exaggerating here, Commissioner, that any given point, there's maybe a handful, like less than 10, that we could invest in. So I think the key piece here is that, it's already pretty restrictive as is. So I tend to think, again, we don't invest in firms that fossil fuels. I think that's important value for the county, but further restricting it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Yeah.
I guess I wasn't thinking about restricting,
Okay.
but there was a filter through it, because usually you have to still get the
Yep.
returns.
Yep.
even with ESG. So they do not invest in fossil fuels. That applies to that small,
Yep.
very small. subgroup.
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's more of a statement of values versus probably, although maybe a couple of the larger.
Well, I mean, it is a statement of values, but I will say that if there's entities that do issue more often, it is fossil fuels companies. They tend to issue a lot.
Because they're larger.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. And that's all. I'll follow up with a couple other things offline.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you so much. I don't see any other questions for this, but lots of great information here, and look forward to thinking about these and then approving them on
Okay.
our budget adoption day.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Sherry. All right, and hello, Christian. So now we are moving into our second item for today's budget work session, which is on Multnomah County's fees. And I will turn things over to you, Christian.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. For the record, I'm Christian Elkin, the county's budget director. I use she, her pronouns. We'll have our slides up here in a minute, but I just wanted to remind everybody we're here to talk about the fee schedule. I have all my fee friends in the audience, which is going to be really exciting. I know. Eric draws a big crowd. Let's not undersell what the excitement there. But so our fee schedule is, if we can go to, we'll skip past the agenda and go to slide 3. So our fee schedule is a centralized resource where everyone can find the comprehensive list of fees and the description of the charges. The final fee schedule, as we talked about, will be voted on by the board on the June 4th, and it'll match the revenue that's assumed in the budget, and then those will go into effect on July 1st. Also, as a reminder, let's say a department needs to change a fee mid-year. They're able to bring that to the board will vote on it, and then we will update that fee schedule, put an updated date on it, and incorporate those changes. This work session just gives you the opportunity to kind of see all of this in one place. Yesterday, we kind of dipped our toes a little bit into how much we have budgeted, but now we'll have each department come down and talk to you. So if we can go to the next slide, please. This is just a reminder of what Eric just talked about, which is our financial policies, and basically saying that, we need to fund services and goods, and sometimes those services get funded in something other than a tax or the general fund or a grant, and that's typically in fees. They are a very small portion of our budget. We are just not a fee-heavy organization. We don't have a water bureau or utilities or any of those things. So when we talk about fees, I think the total amount was $18 million in our $3.9 billion budget. So it is a small amount, but the areas that we do charge fees in, we want to make sure that we're clear and transparent about what those fees are and what they're supporting. So if we can go to the next slide, please. We can go through it. So, we have a financial policy that says, it would we would like to recover 100% of our costs. We do not have all of our fees at 100% cost recovery. There's a lot of reasons for that, and the board can make exemptions for that. When you're talking to departments, they can talk about what those things are. The other thing we need to remember is that a lot of our fees are not set by us. They're set by state statute or some other, ORS, and so we don't have control in those instances of whether or not we're covering our full fees. So when we talk about it, we'll start to make that distinction. If we can go to the next slide, please. One of the things, I have a example of what the fee schedule looks like. It is big, it is lots of pages, there's lots of information in it. But one of the upgrades that we made this year is that we added in a column for an exemption policy, which in a lot of those places that's still being worked on, especially through oh my gosh, what is his name? Chris Neal's office. He's right back there, snap. Let me hear the snap. So, my goodness. And we've also added a year-over-year column. So we have the 26 fee, and then we have the 27 proposed fee, so you can kind of visually go through and see if any fee is being changed quickly. If we can go to the next slide, please. As a reminder, we kind of just touched on this, but we do have 3 categories or ways that we like to think about our fees. We have admin fees. These are kind of your copies, your return check fees, those types of things, and we'll talk about the improvements we've made in that space. We have the fees set by others, and then we have our own program fees. And so one of the things that we added a couple years ago to the fee schedule was showing in that area of program fees what the recovery rate is based on the budget. So all of those recovery documents are in here, so you can turn to any fee and say, we're recovering 75%, we're recovering 80%, and get a sense of where the general fund or other funds might be used in those programs to maybe subsidize that fee. And in a lot of times, it makes a lot of sense, right? So, but having those conversations, I think, are important. If we can go to the next slide, please. This is an example of what that spreadsheet looks like so that you can find that information. And you can see at the bottom, it shows what the cost recovery is in that last line there. We showed you one without any data in it, so that's super helpful. Maybe next year we'll update that. If we can go to the next slide, please. And now we're going to get into our fees by departments. But right before we do that, I'm going to talk about the county-wide projects that we've been working on. So if we can go to the next slide. And one more, please. It's really exciting. We have a one county approach to fees, and last year in the budget process, you will actually, we have a full-time person dedicated to doing this work, implementing the new software that we're using around public records. And so then also along with that, we've been able to redevelop or re-look at our fees that we charge for public records. Public records is different than just a department fee, right? So this is, someone comes to us, they ask us for a bunch of information, and now we have a one county approach. And what this does is it creates transparency and makes sure that we're being equitable, that we're establishing affordability rules. The county attorney's office is really clear that this is the last place we would ever want to get sued for. That has happened in the past to other counties, not to us, where they've essentially been overcharging for recovery of fees. And so we were really, really conservative, and the work group's been spending a lot of time on this and figuring out how to set those public records fees. So if we can go to the next slide, please. This is our first round of what those fees look like. I'm just gonna kind of walk you through what the process was. So basically, we tried to think about the different types of staff that are responding to public records and then categorize them, look at all of those positions, look at the average cost, and then take the lowest cost per hour and use that in our public records fees. And again, that is so that we're not overcharging anyone, over recovering, and so that if someone in the community goes to an individual department, it's not by the individual who's responding to them, right? Like, it's not that specific person's time, but that we're using this kind of generalized rate that we can. And I assure you that the county attorney's office has said that this is a very good model that we're using here, and that we would never hit any of those ceilings. And then also we have a couple of call-outs here for legal and the county attorney's office, because they are involved in so many of our records requests. We wanted to make sure that we had that. Right now, the auditor, the sheriff's office, and the DA's office is not using this schedule. They're evaluating it, and then we're going to see if we need any special call-outs for any of their specialty types of positions as well. The other call-out is that we also have a lot of IT review where they have to go in maybe to emails and grab a bunch of it, and so we have a special call-out for those rates as well. If we can go to the next slide, please. And then here's my great story. They worked so hard on getting actual costs, like for copying and for black and white copying, you know, regular, legal, and they initially brought the first fee schedule back to us, and it was like 7 cents per copy, because that's exactly, and I said, but we don't make pennies. So what if someone gives us a dime and we have to give them 3 cents back? So they were rounding down, and I was like, I feel like a round number works here because of, and I just thought that was so funny, because it was at the exact time when the Mint had stopped making pennies, and I was like, I don't think we can give change for any of this. So you know, 10 cents is the lowest end of what our copies cost us. You may ask, why isn't black and white and color different? Turns out with technology now, there's not a difference in cost for us. And then the other couple of things, we do have some very interesting requests where maybe someone asks for some data on a CD. And so in those very, very small instances, we will charge actual costs to be able to mail that to somebody. And then the return check fee across the county is $25. I should point out that every once in a while, there might be an administrative fee in this fee schedule that is actually tied to somebody like an ORS. So for instance, the county clerks, a lot of their fees are set by the state, and so they might diverge from this fee schedule in some way. But everywhere else, we've asked departments to use this as much as possible. If we can go to the next slide, please. So now I'm gonna invite up all my fee friends, starting with County Human Services.
So group. Can I ask you a question really quick about the public records? So to have consistency across the county, are those all coming in places, or are they still coming in all over the place and coming back out of the, has that been centralized?
I do know that the team that's doing this work will come and talk to you, but we have implemented the, I forget the name of the,
Software?
yeah, is it NeoGov?
I can't remember right
Yeah.
But it's like a centralized software? Because it used to be like, they'd come in all over the place.
Correct. And so now, even if it comes to me like in an email, it gets put into that system.
Yeah, and you are not the expert on our public records, as you should not be. You need to be
I
our
was more
expert on the
interested in
budget.
like how the fees, like the consistency in the fees somewhat is dependent upon everything going to a central place. Or being recorded as central.
Yeah, I mean, the fees should be the same through the departments unless they're different, something's different in statute. But if you want more information, I don't know.
I don't need it right now.
Okay,
Just, I mean,
yeah.
you could cover that, but
Yeah.
And I
We
do
used
know
to have a
that they're
system
going to
where-
bring this back to
Yes.
you all and talk to you about this, along with the exemption policies and all the different components of the process. We just wanted to make sure that we didn't gloss over it when we talked about the fee schedule, and that is in motion in tandem alongside of the fee schedule, that project as well.
Great. County Human Services, welcome. Our first group of fee friends.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Jacob Mestman. I use he and him pronouns. I work as a budget manager for Aging, Disability, and Veteran Services Division.
And good morning, Commissioners and Chair. I'm Stephen Esser, he, him pronouns, and I manage the Adult Care Home Program.
All right, next slide, please. So we are here today to talk about the Adult Care Home Program fees and fines that are collected. And you can see from this slide, in fiscal year '26, this year, we have $428,000, almost $429,000 that we're expecting to bring in fees and fines. And for fiscal year '27, that amount is dropping to, we're anticipating about $290,000 due to some of the foster homes going back to the state, which we can talk a little bit about. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit about how these funds are used. So we use these funds to draw down Medicaid. And so our Medicaid match percentage that we have in the budget for fiscal year '27 is 39%. And so that means that for each 39 cents draws down $1 of Medicaid. And so for fiscal year '27, we're expecting that $290,000 to bring in about $743,000 in Medicaid dollars. Next slide, please.
All right, and this is a slide represents the fees that we collect. The fees are determined from county code for us, and pretty straightforward. We do criminal record checks for caregivers, household members, operators, resident managers, and it's $15 for the background check fee. And then for licensing of the care homes, the license is an annual license fee, and it's charged per bed at $60, and they can have a maximum of 5 residents, so $300 for the largest home. And resident manager application fees are $25, and the caregiver application fees are $10. And there's been no changes with that.
And that's DCHS's fees. So are there any questions for DCHS?
That's our code, right? So we are setting those fees, that's not a state mandated?
That's correct.
Okay,
Ours are
great.
set there, yeah.
Sorry, and at the end, you said there hasn't been a change since when?
It's been quite a while. I mean, I've been 2020 and we haven't touched it, so I think it's beyond that, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking the cost of a cup of coffee here and then looking at caregiver fees and that kind of thing, so yeah. I know background checks are moving to every 3 years. They're currently 2 years, so I think maybe as we look into next year, maybe look at what kind of adjustments we might want to consider at that time.
I was looking for something, so I wasn't listening. I'll just say that. I was trying to cross-check because it looks like, I was looking at the appendix and then the PowerPoint, but you are 100% cost recovery? Do I have that right? Do I have the right? Am I looking-
No, that's not correct.
Okay, so, okay, well, I won't look for it then.
Yeah, the adult care home program is about a $6.2 million program in fiscal year '26. Our total Medicaid budget is about $87 million. So this, that 700,000 or so is a very small amount of the Medicaid that we draw down with those fees and fines.
Okay, I was actually looking at something slightly different piece of it. I was looking at the fees for just like the application fee with the criminal background check. It looked like $15. Is that right? That's how much it costs?
Yeah, yeah.
Like some sort of volume discount? Or is it like a pretty skinny?
I think it's fairly standard, I think, but we have, I think some of the operators of the homes will often pay those for the caregiver. Probably one of the considerations is you don't want to have a barrier to a caregiver trying to qualify and paying, but that is a pretty reasonable, economical rate, I think. Maybe consider it for the future.
Application fees, those are full cost recovery for like the implementation of the system? It seems rather low.
Can you ask that again?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah.
Sorry. Like the application fees, are those full cost recovery too? Those are very,
I'm unclear about when you say full cost recovery. Can you explain that, please?
so there's, at the very end, there is this appendix that says whether, on all the fees, whether they're full cost recovery, whether the cost of, say, processing the application or doing the background check, whether that's a full recovery. Somebody's
have-
coming up to.
Phone a friend, a phone a free friend.
I felt left out of the fee friends. Robert Stoll, I'm the DCHS finance manager. Those fees have not been updated for about 18 years. We're actually in the process of working with the county attorney to look at two things. One is, should we model, because the state has just gone to a 2-year option on some of those fees. We're looking at, can we do that logistically, accounting-wise? How do we handle that? But we're also going to look at the rate. So the 27 budget is built on these rates, but I think come fall, we'll probably come back with revised rates that are much more up to date at this point.
I was going to say, they look like 18-year-old.
They are
like
18-year.
$10 and $20. And again, we just went through this whole thing with the restaurants they're at 100%. But I'm a little bit confused now because it looks like in the back, and this is an answer afterwards, but I swear it says that it's full cost recovery.
Yeah, and it's covering about 7 positions, mostly because we can leverage the money to get Title 19 Medicaid. So that $290,000 becomes $700 and something thousand worth of Medicaid, which covers about 7 positions fully. But to your point, is it full cost recovery? That entire program offers $6-something million. So it's only really covering sort of 7 positions, if you will.
Yeah. Okay, just for future, I'm interested, like, it seems like 18 years, and it seems like we have different standards depending on different industries, and I'll have some other questions as we get, not for you all, but I think it's worth just looking at whether, especially if it's a like for-profit client, of what the county is charging in terms of licensing or fees or background checks. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know if this is allowed. I might want to differentiate between a fee of a provider who does take Medicaid versus a fee for a provider who does not. Again, might not be allowed. I have no idea. But obviously, anything that incentivizes people's willingness to take Medicaid clients would be a plus. A quick question on the criminal background check. Are we doing those, or does that go to ODHS?
We process the front end of it as the qualifying entity designee, essentially, and then it goes through Orchards to DHS for their processing. There is an option for the operator to become their own QED, in which case they would submit it directly to DHS, and then they can just submit like the final approval letter to us.
But if there was an issue that came up, we don't apply the weight test. That goes to
Correct.
DHS.
That's DHS.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you all so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Community justice, come on
Community
down.
justice. DCJ Fee Friends.
We can go 2 slides forward, please.
Good morning. It's happy to be a part of the Fee Friends this morning. We rarely get called that, actually. These be like shirts and hats. So, good morning. I'm Suzanne Brown McBride. I'm Deputy Director at DCJ. I use she, her pronouns. I'm here for Director Pena. I'm accompanied by Colby Dixon, our Business Services Manager, and Laura Bisbee, our Family Resolution Services Manager. And we'll be going over DCJ's budget and related revenue generated from them. So if you go to the first slide, it shows our fee and revenue that's budgeted for FY 2027 as compared to FY 2026. The slight increase is based on a 3-year historical trend and analysis of these two fees. DCJ's fee revenue is related to our Family Resolution Services Program, which you're going to hear about in just a second. And although DCJ only collects the parent education fees, the parent education portion of the fees, the marriage license and domestic partnership fees that are collected by DCM, and you'll hear from them shortly, and a portion of those is distributed to DCJ per statute that requires us to be used for mediation and reconciliation and conciliation services. I'll pass it to Laura to elaborate on sort of what the parent education fees are and the program associated with it, if you could go to the next slide.
So I'm Laura Bisbee. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the manager for Family Resolution Services. We offer a parent education class for parents going through divorce, separation, or custody case if they were never married. It's required statutorily if you have a family law case where a child's custody is being decided. That class we charge $70 for that class. And by the way, that fee has been the same since I've been here, and I've been here 9 years. And the content of the class is also outlined in the statute. It includes things such as co-parenting communication strategies, options for conflict resolution, the impact of divorce and separation on children at different developmental stages. It provides an explanation of the legal concepts of custody versus parenting time. And really the class centers on ways for parents throughout the process of divorce and post-separation and divorce, ways for them to reduce children's exposure to conflict. I don't know if there's any questions.
I will just appreciate the clarity in the actual fee schedule document of when waivers can happen, because I know this can sometimes be a challenge.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, we do have a fee waiver process that we have, and we're working on making that more efficient and less paperwork for the public when they have to go through that fee waiver process. So, and we were discussing before we met this morning, I don't know the exact number of people who take the class who obtain a fee waiver, but I have a feeling it's probably well over 50% of the people who take our class. So we recognize there can be financial hardships, especially during that transition.
Thank you.
Again, I was cross-checking the report with the PowerPoint. So I'm curious, so there's no fee changes in the 2027 budget, but there's a significant increase of like 600,000? I was to say, like, what is that attributed to?
I think it's mostly utilization. I think we have more people going through the program, so you're just seeing revenue increase because of sheer numbers coming through.
Yeah, so I review how much we collect, and I look at 3-year historicals, and I look at the trends of like, is it going up, is it going down, and so we adjust based on that. And then because it's a fee, we do keep track of the revenue because we can only spend what we collect, and so the budget accounts for what we anticipate collecting, but again, if there's less cases for them to process, we would charge less fees, and then our revenue would go down, but this is based on budget, so it's what we anticipate we will collect based on historicals, and just the steady increase.
And when was the last time these fees increased? Or just 18 years ago, or?
Yeah, so for the...
at least plus 10.
Yeah, it's for these specific ones, it's been a while, but I think we look more at
back when I got my marriage license here?
Yeah, the marriage license is separate, actually. I just did a cost analysis paper for that, so it's with Justin. So I think we're looking, that's because we do that in tandem with DCM, like, are we gonna pass? We could potentially collect more for that, specifically for our services, because the state just passed a new ORS. So right now it's limited to $10. They just increased it to $35 up to. So I have a proposal in to maybe talk about that. It's either we take more of the fee, and then there'd be some issues for DCM because they collect that revenue as well, and it would be less for them because we're required to give some to the state. So, but then for us, we could just also pass it on to the public. So you all will have to make that decision yourselves, but it's a separate conversation. So if we do change fees, it will come back before you. So I think we're early in that conversation, and then depending on how we want to handle that, it will be presented to you, and then we would change our fee schedule accordingly.
I mean, I think with the high number of waivers, it's obvious that we're not paying for the program. You know, it's not like breaking even in that sense, but we are trying to recognize that folks are struggling to be able to pay for it, so figuring out what the right revenue mix would be important, but there is significant underwriting by our county general fund and other funding sources.
And what's the cost recovery on your fees?
For this one, it's 100%. So we have personnel that are allocated percentage-wise, and so we look at how much it is. Right now it is. So I think every year we do a historical, so it may change next year based on, you know, how much they actually of this work they have to do for their FTE time. So it's an annual analysis that we do to kind of see if we are breaking even for the amount it costs to run it, but as of right now, we are.
Good, okay, thank you.
Do we know the compliance rate, or is that something only the court would know?
Compliance rate for people taking the class?
Yes, who are required to.
Well, in order to complete a divorce or a family law case or a custody case, you have to have a certificate from the class. So if
Oh,
you
you're
wanna
still
get
married.
divorced,
Oh, okay.
You got to get your certificate. So I'm guessing it's pretty high.
Okay.
I've never asked that question on the judicial department side, like how many people are, I mean, you can't complete your case without it. So it's mandatory for you to get all the way through the process. So I imagine it's pretty high.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Thank you guys very much.
All right, county management.
We just have one fee friend from DCM coming down today. I know, like all the fees in DCM. Hello.
Yeah, we're going to go through each one detailed line now. Mike Vaughn, Department of County Management, County Assessor, here to represent the fee schedule. Next slide, please. So most of these fees that we generate in DCM are generated out of the Division of Assessment, Recording, and Taxation. Most of the fees that we have are dictated by statute or some other jurisdiction that got a law changed, like we just talked about with DCJ. We'll see here a significant increase year over year, which is primarily related to the increased forecast for recording fees that the Budget Office has determined compared from 26 to 27. Some fees are collected through FRM, which is Finance, Risk, and Management. They do collect an admin fee for accounting services as well as pass-through fees of return checks that we'll talk about. Next slide, please. So we have multiple pages of fees in DART, so we're not going to go through each one of them. I'll save everyone the time here, but we'll just talk about at a high level marriage license fees, which we just talked about. In DART, we do collect a $60 fee for that, and statute dictates how that money is distributed. So the county of that $60 fee gets $25 that goes to the general fund, another $25 goes to the state DHS, and then $10 goes to DCJ, as we just heard. Of course, when a jurisdiction like DCJ gets a statutory change and has the ability or flexibility to change those fees, basically we're waiting for that jurisdiction or department to let us know what those new fees are going to be. Until then, we have to reflect what we know and what we've been told accordingly. As I've mentioned, FRM has other fees. They do charge an accounting service fee. We believe, when I was looking at some of the reports, I think it's about $20,000, but if Eric can sort of nod, that would be great.
He's nodding.
He's nodding. Okay, great. So about $20,000 for, I believe it's 2 other districts that we provide some accounting services to, and then, of course, return check fees of about $25, which are pass-throughs. For fiscal year 27, we're not anticipating or requesting any fee changes at this time. And happy to answer questions.
Any questions for?
I do.
All right, Mike.
I do have a question. On the real estate side, I don't see this, do we currently charge a real estate transaction fee?
Commissioner, we do not.
Are we legally allowed to charge a real estate transaction fee?
The only county that I'm aware of legally that has that ability is Washington County. I
And
believe.
why does Washington County have that ability and we wouldn't?
I am not a legal expert, but I think it has to do with some amendment to the Constitution that happened where they had already had a fee in place and no other county can adopt one, I believe.
Of any kind? Like if we wanted hypothetically to copy Los Angeles and New York and have a mansion real estate transaction fee for properties over $10 million?
We need a state law. This
We would
was
have to
something
go
I
to-
worked on
So
when I
was
was in the governor's office,
But
yeah.
Wasn't there a constitutional amendment that was put forward kind of preemptively to disallow real estate
course there
transactions?
I believe, Chair, that's exactly
Yeah.
the reason why Washington County is the only one that gets it.
Yeah.
Well, we have carried bills at the state to do a real estate transfer fee, but unsurprisingly, they're met with massive opposition. And so they have not passed.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Okay.
County assets, come on down. Dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun.
Theme music, matching shirts, like, you gotta.
Or cake. Should I have walking music person they select? Can we get it selected?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely.
That's what makes it entertaining.
Fantastic. Good morning, Chair Commissioners. I am your fee friend, Nancy Artman, Budget and Finance Director from Department of County Assets, and I use she, her pronouns. If you could- you're not controlling the slide deck. Why am I looking at Christian? Next slide, please. What, you take care of everything else. What you might notice missing from our slide deck is a graph showing revenue. That is because DCA does not offer programs or classes or licenses from which we would collect that revenue. So in accordance with Rec 2, we do waive fees for records that come to us. However, we do have team members that track that data, so number of requests and time is spent to fulfill each of those. We have aligned for those that are outside of that process where waiver would apply. We have aligned our fees for the coming year with county fees.
Any questions? Nailed it. Yeah. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy.
Our next fee friend is the District Attorney's Office. Welcome, fee friend. Hi, Jessica.
Jessica Eden, Business Services Manager for the District Attorney's Office. I use she, her pronouns. Next slide, please. So here you'll see our fiscal year 26 adopted fees compared to our fiscal year 27 requested forecasted fees. And while our fees themselves are not changing this year, we do have an increased forecasted revenue. These are entirely comprised essentially of our discovery fees, and our case volume has been higher. Discovery is one of the kinds of fees that we charge as part of the mandatory legal process whereby prosecutors provide evidence to defense attorneys. Next slide, please. So again, we have the discovery fees that is entirely made up of cost of materials and a flat fee by case type. This has to do with, again, providing materials to the defense attorneys. Our public records requests at this time are not being part of the county-wide public records request, but we do intend to evaluate that for fiscal year 28. We simply didn't have enough time. We do provide a lot of unusual physical evidence because, or physical records, because some of our records are still, frankly, on microfiche and other things that didn't make sense for the county to adopt a county-wide process for. And we, frankly, yeah. Yeah.
I'm the baby.
So at any rate, we will be looking at that for fiscal year 28, but for this year are sticking with our independently managed public records fees. Are there any questions?
I'm just curious about the cost recovery. Yours doesn't have one in the supplemental, whatever that supplemental information form was. You're like, maybe there is one and it just didn't make it.
This is the one project that I really don't manage myself, that my staff does, so we will look that up for you, find out.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Sure. Next, we have the Sheriff's Office. Good morning, welcome.
Morning, Chair.
Oh, just hit that button if you could. There you go.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Scott Schlimpert. He, him pronouns. I'm the Sheriff's Finance Manager. Sheriff's Office fee schedule for 27 remains unchanged from 26. Next slide, please. All right, this slide shows the Sheriff's Office's overall fee budget for fiscal years 26 and 27. The general fund increase of approximately 20 grand represents an estimated increase in our civil process fee revenue, and the increase in other funds of approximately $165,000 represents an estimated increase in our concealed handgun licenses revenue. Next slide, please. In the general fund, the Sheriff's Office collects fees in 3 programs. The communications program oversees the collection of fees for general records requests, archive requests, file searches, etc. These fees are collected from several sources, including the public, nonprofit organizations, legal firms, and news agencies. The civil process program delivers all court action documents through notification to parties of a pending court action. Fees are collected for notices, writs, and protective orders. The Enforcement Support Program receives, processes, and maintains law enforcement, warrant, and protective order records for Multnomah County. And in addition to assisting the civil process program, this program collects fees for explosive permits, towing licensing, liquor licensing, and secondhand dealer permits. Next slide, please. In other funds, the Sheriff's Office collects fees in 2 programs. The Concealed Handgun Licensing Program administers and manages all aspects of applying for and the issuance of concealed carry licenses. This program is responsible for investigating applicants and issuing concealed handgun licensing to those who meet the legal standards set by Oregon revised statutes. The Alarms Program issues burglary alarm permits for both residential and commercial customers located in unincorporated Multnomah County and 5 cities located in East Multnomah County: Gresham, Fairview, Troutdale, Wood Village, and Maywood Park. Any questions?
Yes, I have a question related to handgun permits, and I don't remember the new date for the delayed implementation of the ballot measure that would require a little bit different system. But do you have a sense of, one, when is that now that we're going to comply, and 2, to what degree that it both changes expense and fee?
I do not, but I did bring a subject matter expert with me.
Okay.
All right, an ancillary fee friend, come on down. Good morning.
Hello, Francis Coffey and pronouns. So can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Oregon ballot measure 114?
114, yes.
When is the new, I believe the legislature delayed it, I could be wrong, the implementation date, and how will it impact both the cost of the handgun permit, which isn't, I think it's all gun, I can't really remember, I'm sorry, and also the fees we'll charge?
So 114 has to do with the purchase permit. In order for purchasing firearms, it's going to be separate from concealed handgun licensing. It'll still most likely be ran by the same unit. At the current time, it is still held up with the Oregon Supreme Court. We're waiting for a decision by that court to decide whether or not it's constitutional or not. Should it be found constitutional through the last legislative session, it was decided that implementation date will be January 1 of 2028. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Thank you both. All right, and next up we have the library. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Katie Shifley, fee friend for the library. So I'll be covering the fees for the library today. If you want to go to the next slide. On this chart, you can see the library fine and fee collections going back to FY19. And as you can see, you guys have seen this chart before. We've had a pretty significant drop-off since FY19. In recent years, our fees have kind of hovered closer to $15,000, $20,000. But we are budgeting for a slight uptick in FY27 up to about $40,000. That's still only about 0.03% of our total revenue, so still really not a major budget factor for us, but we'll talk today about what that $24,000 difference is. If we want to take us to the next slide, as I noted, that drop-off from FY19, you can see in that chart there, is largely due to a policy decision made several years ago to go fine-free. So starting in 2016, we eliminated youth late fines. In 2020, late fines were eliminated for all patrons. Patrons are still asked to pay the replacement cost of books if they're not returned within 49 days after the due date. We do have really clear direction in our staff procedures manuals and our training for staff to clear those fees for patrons as needed, and they do so really regularly. So I looked up what our fee waiver percentage was for FY25, our most recent fiscal year, and it was about 85%. So that's a really regular practice for us. We also charge administrative fees for things like return checks, mailed holds, excluding homebound services, a portion of interlibrary loan costs, and we also have a fee for non-resident cardholders that use library services but don't live within our service area or a reciprocal area. And on the next slide, we'll talk about that a little bit more because that is an area of a fee change for us this year. The last time that the non-resident library card fee was updated was 2013. So this is one of those ones that's got a pretty big increase, and we are definitely going to start bringing this forward more regularly because the increase is larger than we would like to see. The increase this year is going to be going from 180 to 285. The basis of this rate is taking the median assessed home value for the county and multiplying that by the district rate. It's essentially just meant to approximate what county residents are paying for library services. It's pretty low utilization. There's just 23 active households that are using this, that have this fee, they're paying this fee. And as I said, we're pretty committed to bringing this forward more regularly so we don't see these big spikes going forward. On the next slide, we do have some brand new fees this year, and they're related to some of our new specialized offerings at the East County Library. We have 2 new spaces that are going to be available to the community to rent for a fee. They are the new 200-person auditorium at East County Library and then the rooftop terrace. So when these spaces are not in use by the library, they can be rented for larger gatherings, lectures, workshops, performances, and private events. Exactly, exactly. And you can see on this slide here, I won't read them out loud to you, but the base rates for the auditorium, which has rentals from 4 hours to 8 hours, broken up by entity type, so individual, nonprofit, or government, and then for-profit, as well as for the rooftop terrace.
Can I ask a question about that?
Of course, yeah.
For-profit? So do we have any sort of limit on, say somebody rented it and then charged an entrance fee, or?
We do have a full sort of auditorium and a rooftop terrace like policy that will coincide with these rates. I have a phone a friend card that I brought with me to come up and talk about that if you'd like to talk a little bit deeper about that. I don't know off the top of my head what the rules are around that, but we do have a policy around that.
Great, I'd love to see it. Just, sure. I could see, I mean, it's a great venue, like somebody like, I'll use this to somehow like generate a lot of revenue, and then we're only charging them a small amount, which doesn't look like cost recovery.
Yeah. If you'd like, we can share the draft policy with you.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So in developing these fees, kind of our focus was on emphasizing access for the community with cost recovery. These are specialized amenities that have a requirement of extra support from program staff, janitorial, audiovisual, just to kind of like manage these events to support these spaces. In terms of how the fees themselves were developed, we're kind of aware that we're working with limited data, and so we've made some assumptions around what level of support we think that these new spaces are going to require for different event lengths and types, and use that to develop this rate structure. But we're pretty aware that going forward into FY '28, we might need to make some updates as we learn more about how these spaces are actually being used and overall demand, things like that. And that's what I've got for library fees, but we're happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I'll be really interested in that. Probably the most for a for-profit, if it might make sense for anything that would sell a ticket to have like a base or X percentage of ticket price, whatever. But I'm really, really excited for this as an option.
Yeah, and if it would be helpful to the board, we can send you a summary of kind of some of the policy language that we're developing that kind of goes along with this, and just kind of share that with you, if that would be helpful. Yeah, absolutely.
I think just on that piece too, there's also other venues that we're competing with. I don't expect you to send me what they do, but if there's policies that you use to kind of frame how you all pulled that together, that might be helpful to know.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. You know, our goal was to kind of make sure that we were thinking about our fee structure in terms of like our cost recovery, and this is not full cost recovery for all levels of the entity types. It is, the goal was kind of get there for profit, but then we have sort of scaled down from there. And as we were kind of developing that, we were doing kind of checks against other entities that have similar size venues to make sure that we weren't sort of like wildly out of scale with them, and I don't think that we are. And we definitely looked at their policies overall to kind of glean ideas, make sure that we're kind of like following along with sort of a common practice. So yeah, we've definitely been looking and stealing from others as we go along.
Thank you. Yeah. Just one question on the previous slide. I know it's only 23 active accounts that have the non-resident card holders, but it's a pretty significant jump. Just has there been engagement with them? Is this something that you all have talked directly with the card holders about?
It is not. I think that it is something that we will do if the board is, approves this to move forward. It's something we would actually absolutely reach out to them and kind of let them know. So, yeah.
Thank you.
If there's support, then for sure.
Thank you, Katie. That looks like the end of the questions. I'll just say we have about 7 minutes till noon, and I know a couple people have a hard stop. So, and we have 2 more departments to cover their fees, and I know there's several, especially for the health department.
As they come down, Commissioner, I haven't answered your question. The DA fees are all admin fees because they're kind of just distributed across the department, so they're not developed to support a specific program. I wish I would have known that before you asked that question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good morning, barely.
Barely, but yes.
I can make this quick. My name is Margie Bradway, Director of Community Services. I've been your fee friend a lot this year, your original fee friend. Yeah, the OG of fee friend. Yeah, it's done a lot of fee work. And with me, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Britta Shinsky. I'm the Finance Manager for the Department of Community Services, and I use she, her pronouns. Thank you.
So I'm going to do an overview. We do have our division managers in the audience, but we have dove in quite deep into our fees. The one thing I want to say about, we've done 3 comprehensive fee studies in the last calendar year. And with each one, we use the same methodology, same lead researcher, looking at surveys, data, interviewing staff, interviewing stakeholders. But for all 3 studies, we came to 3 different conclusions on how we should change our fee structure. And I think that's really important. Those comprehensive studies are really important as we go through updating the fees. So with that, here's our, Britta, you want to take this slide?
Yeah, so this slide shows our fees this fiscal year, our budgeted fees this fiscal year and next fiscal year. I'm just going to note that the majority of this is our vehicle registration fees. That makes up about $32 million of this in fiscal year 2027, which on this chart is almost 90% of the chart. And just as a reminder, that's for restricted use only on the Willamette River bridges. The other fees are from our other divisions, animal services, and land use planning, which Margie will talk about in the next slide.
So next slide, animal services. We have a wide range of animal licensing fees. as well as fines. That brings in approximately $1.5 million. Note that goes directly into the general fund, so it does not come back to MCAS. Same with land use planning. This year, anticipating $644,000 of revenue. Again, that goes back into the general fund. Transportation, VRF, stands for Vehicle Registration Fees. As Britta says, that's the highest amount. In many ways, it acts like the gas tax in terms of it combines with the gas tax and pays for transportation. That is a restricted fund at approximately $32 million. The other fees, the $1.8 million you see, are a wide range of transportation and right-of-way fees. That also includes survey. We do plan next year to do a deep study of survey. I can see the anticipation on your faces, very exciting. That will be our next fee study coming to you. It's due for an update in 2027. And then last but not least is elections. And as Christian noted earlier, those are set by the state for a wide range of election activities. And then next slide, started to cover this already, but noting that we made changes to the Code and Animal Services this year. The director already had the authority for a fee waiver, so I just wanted to note that that does include it. And we eliminated certain fees and gave more flexibility to the fee process. But again, it was compliance that was the problem, what we found in MCAS, and we focused our efforts on compliance. And land use planning, this upcoming fiscal year for FY 2027, the chair's budget proposes to raise fees by 28%. I do want to say that's on top of the 54% that we raised it in FY 2026. So we continue to increase those fees to match what our partners are doing around the state. And we came before you also to make sure that the director has the ability to waive fees. And then last but not least, it was just back in March, we updated our transportation permitting fees. We increased those where we could, and as we discussed this board, many of those fees are restricted by the state. But our resolution did include the ability to give a fee waiver. And with elections, we can't make any changes. That's it. Yeah.
Question about the land use planning, because I think when there was that significant increase, it still was far away from full cost recovery. But I think one of the things was that it was going to speed up service. Did that actually happen?
Yes, it did. And I can't, I talk about it with Commissioner Moyer. I'm just so proud. We've got Megan here, Gibb, right there. She gets a ton of credit. Wave, Megan. But when she came on, our response times were 12 days, and then she got them down to 5, then she got them down to 0. So we saw that. That was part of her leadership and reorganization. That was in part bringing on that new planner. And I just want to thank the chair. In her proposed budget, she is kind of restoring that extra planner. So we're not adding yet another planner, but we're keeping that planner on. We've seen huge gains from that ad.
So I think it's always worth noting when there's been a fee increase, but there was a promised service level increase, that we should always note that.
Okay. Just we will.
I mean, it's one of those things that people like classically complain about, whether it's the city of Portland or the county, just how long things take. And so if there is a speeding up, I think we should acknowledge it.
Yeah, I think there's a quantitative data, and I hope there's qualitative data, and I try to look at our 2 commissioners that we work for. I think hopefully your office is hearing we've been providing better customer service since you came on. We try to communicate with you. So we try.
A lot of worry about a cell phone tower right now.
I cannot make that go away, but I can get back to someone faster on that. So. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, this is an MCAS licensing question. I know that there's an issue with the required vaccination. Is there any movement on that at all?
So we have met with government relations, and MCAS director Aaron Grayheck is in the audience as well. I think that's a legislative concept that we're exploring. It wasn't a good concept for the short session, but we will explore it for the long session, and that's good that sounds like that's something you might be interested in supporting. We'd have to uncouple it at the state level.
And do we allow veterinarians to help us process, since they would be the ones who do that, I hope?
Yeah, that's one thing we're exploring. We've met with a company that actually is like a third party, provides a third-party service to go around and work with veterinarians. They've done it in other counties. We haven't contracted with it yet, but we're exploring this relationship with them that would act like a third. We don't have the staff to go out and talk to every veterinarian, but we're looking at hiring them to provide that link.
All right, thank you. And we're going to get that loft changed too.
Yes. Okay, we've got two commissioners. Legislative concept, I'll let GR know. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, last but not least, our fee friends from the Health Department.
Last but most.
I know. Maybe we should like reorder the departments, like, yeah.
This is great.
T-shirts and flip the script. Good morning, or no, good afternoon.
Walk up in a second.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Trista Zugel. I'm the Health Department Budget Director. If we can move to the next slide. The Health Department anticipates collecting a little over $13 million in fees in fiscal year 2027, a roughly 4% increase over the amount we have budgeted in our 2026 budget. Next slide. So these are three of our primary fees. Health inspections, we expect to collect about 8.3. I just changed things a lot. $8.3 million. The fees collected are collected under county code as well as an intergovernmental agreement that we have with the Oregon Health Authority. These fees pay for the licensing and inspections of various facilities, including restaurants, mobile units, including food carts and temporary events, tourist facilities, schools, and childcare programs. We also collect fees for the Emergency Medical Services Oversight Program. Agencies pay $250 per ambulance per year. They also pay a franchise fee, and between those two fees, they cover the total cost of the program. Let's see, tobacco licensing fees, we expect to collect roughly $0.88 million or $0.9 million. We are required by code and state law to license and inspect tobacco retailers. We are increasing this fee, so there's more information on that in a future slide. So moving on to the next slide. So regarding inspection fees, and this is we call these inspections fees, we call these environmental health fees, and we also call them restaurant inspection fees. Those terms are generally interchangeable. This program safeguards public health and support a strong restaurant, food cart, and hospitality economy by preventing illnesses and outbreaks. The program operates in 26 and moving into 27 on a full cost recovery fee-based model. And we work with the Food Service Advisory Committee to set the rates. The health inspection budget estimates are driven by facility counts, and that dictates the labor hours and equipments needed based on mandatory inspection frequencies. Next slide. So the next couple slides we have give you a sampling of different fees based upon the size of the facility. So these are some the ones on this slide pertain mostly to restaurants, and you can see the 26 fee and the 27 fee at the 6.5% increase year over year. And the next slide is for some of our smaller facilities.
How did you get the 6.5% inflation growth?
I have a fee friend here to help.
Fee friend.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Martin. I'm the Environmental Health Manager. I use he and him pronouns. The 6.5% fee increase was based off of the number of facilities that we have and number of hours that we need from the inspectors and the office assistants to actually perform that work, as well as some of our general cost increases that have occurred over the year, including how we've streamlined some of our approaches to ensure that we're giving better service to our operators. So we've seen an increase in some materials and services and some contracts, and when we have full cost recovery, so that's how we set that 6.5.
Moving on to the next slide. So regarding tobacco license fees, this fee will increase 44% to collect roughly $0.88 million in fiscal year 2027. So this program safeguards public health by reducing youth access to tobacco and nicotine products, and provides training to retailers. So the fee increase that you're seeing here aligns us with the state fees for tobacco retail establishments. Prior to this increase, the Multnomah County will have been one of the least expensive places to sell tobacco in the state of Oregon. And the revenue is driven, expectations are driven by retailer counts and the estimates of license and also penalties fees based upon divisional trends. And the county board last increased these fees in 2019. And just wanted to note that penalty fees are also increasing between 100% and 400% depending upon the violation. Yes, yeah, betweening, yes.
I know,
Apologies.
I'm going to use it all the time.
All fault is mine, yeah.
I have a question about the tobacco fees.
Yes.
I think I saw here that it's not full cost recovery. So if there's a state, I don't know if it's a requirement, there's a requirement to license them, but did they require anything around the size of the fee?
No, Kirsten Aird, she, her pronouns, Public Health Director. Great question. So there's not a requirement from the state on how much we can bill, we can charge for our fees. This first attempt is just to get us into alignment with them as we move towards working towards full cost recovery.
So how many light tobacco licenses do we have?
Ooh, that's a great question.
And one of the reasons I'm asking this is like, you know, that I've been kind of on the restaurant fees, as you probably know, well, maybe for the last several years. And we've, you know, even though restaurants got hammered, they got fee increases, and it was to be full cost recovery. So I'm wondering why we're not doing the same thing with tobacco retailers who are, I think, contribute less to, my own value judgment, contribute less than restaurants.
That is an excellent question, and 44% and coming up to be equal with the state was where we thought was the best place to start.
And how many licenses are there?
780.
780, okay.
And is the state just like, we're using that just kind of as a marker, but it's not a ceiling for us?
No, it is not. Okay. It is just, for us, what was really upsetting was that it was really easy and cheaper to sell tobacco, which is the leading cause of preventable death in this county. And so noted absolutely what you're saying.
I likely will have an amendment to the fee schedule after consultation with the health department.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And it's accurate that we cannot in any way regulate, inspect, or require licensing fees of cannabis, is that correct?
Not currently.
Okay.
Yeah, this is just about tobacco.
All right. Any other questions? That brings us to the end of our agenda on fees. Thank you to all our friends today for this. Thank you, Christian, for your team. We will be back here. Oh, we will be back here tomorrow, but first we have an amendment from District 3.
Budget neutral. And it is creating an economic development and workforce development manager. There you go.
Oh, it's on the form.
It actually is pretty easy, just. And the second one is, and these will be posted for others who want, and the other one is a reduction in the non-D commission transition budget, and the that's the offset, and the pay for is 3 positions in their legal assistant positions, which are positions in the DA's office for property and narcotics units, and then robbery, traffic, and gun units.
Thank you. Any questions about these or any other amendments for today? I don't know what I used. Come on. Oops. Okay, great. I know we'll have lots more discussion on all the amendments that are going to be coming forward. That concludes today's budget work session. Our next meeting will be our regular boarding meeting scheduled for tomorrow, Thursday, April 23rd at 9:30 a.m. There being no further business, we are adjourned.